to know when couples argue too much? Like, what's the line? Have you ever wondered what the line is? Like, how much do you and your spouse argue? Is it every day? Is it once a month? Are you the couple that claims to never argue, to always get along? And so that's what I'm curious about today. If you argue too much, or I'm curious if you are worried that maybe it's going overboard in your relationship, or maybe it's you're constantly avoiding and they're constantly pursuing for a completion of an argument. And maybe it's a timing thing, but really all couples wonder, like, what kind of issues are we supposed to argue about? Some newlywed couples are under the impression that arguing is bad and that you never should, and that if you argue, it must be that there's a lack of love. And I guess I want to encourage all of you to look through this other lens. Like, every marriage is two cultures colliding together in a covenant contract where they covenant with each other to love and to honor and cherish and be with and remain eternally with each other for better and worse. Now, a lot of times we get caught like for better because it's going to be awesome and there's lots of fun things that we can do together. But then there's also worse, the worst. That's the arguments. That's when the two individuals collide together because they come from different backgrounds, different places. And I mean it literally. They're two cultures. They might be from the same little town in Idaho or in southern Utah. They might be one from the East Coast and one from a little town in Idaho. That was my experience and is my experience. And so bringing these two cultures together, you might have one that believes that raising a voice means you're angry, while the other one believes that raising your voice means you have passion and you're like intense about something, a topic. And so that would need to be ironed out. Can you imagine if this is sort of my experience where my whole family raised their voice on most everything. And Chris's whole family was pretty even-tempered, rarely raised their voice, if ever. Her dad never cursed, and I thought my name was Little S-H-I, you finish the rest yourself, until I was about 7 years old because I got swore at so much. So it's super different where we come from. And so when I would escalate, I would feel like I'm just expressing a passionate point of view, and she would shrink thinking I was incredibly angry and maybe even going to be violent. And it always surprised me when she shrank. I thought, well, man, I must really be smart and get my way a lot. But really, she would just avoid. And so we have to be careful as these two cultures come together. So as both spouses come together, as you both have these strengths and weaknesses, things will play out where you come to disagreements. And both have ideas. Both of you, both spouses are going to have ideas about what is terrible and what is wonderful and what is neutral and what's a good date night activity and what isn't. And sure, you date before you get married and you get to know each other before you get married, but you've got years, decades of change and growth, and you'll change and grow in your own ways and have to negotiate that through arguments and complaints. And finding the need buried inside of each of those processes is super important. And so, really, you're going to argue, you're going to complain in a marriage, although that's healthy. If you are in a relationship where you really can't or don't communicate in a healthy way when conflict arises, like if it gets super competitive every time where it's just not about hearing each other but competing to win, if you try to minimize each other's perspective, like, oh, that's stupid, oh, don't be silly, or I don't understand why you even believe that, like if you're minimizing the other ones, or that's not true because it's exactly how I see it, not how you see it, that would be a form of minimizing by holding your opinion out to be fact instead of just sharing an opinion. So couples that do that, that become competitive, that become minimizers of the other's experience, that become dismissers of the other's experience, they are super toxic relationships. Those are the ones that need to get therapy. Those are the types of arguers that are headed for either a long, miserable, violent life or divorce. And so keep that in mind. Keep that as we go through this, that the most toxic arguers are those that minimize the other's experience, deny the others can have their experience, tell them that they're just lying or that it's not true, that what I see is true, what I see is and watch out for saying, well, my truth is, because literally, like, truth is like independent of both of you. My opinion is probably a fair statement. But if I say my truth is that we need to drive fast on the freeway because we have a Tesla, I mean, that's not my truth, that's my opinion. The truth is there's a speed limit. The truth is I'm either going to go above or below the speed limit. And so really watch out for this whole idea that you have a truth that's uniquely yours, that you beat your other person up with. On the flip side, people that can claim they're in a healthy relationship and state, we never argue, we get along on every point, they're probably both avoiders. Two avoidant attachment styles together can become like, we just both avoid everything and either stuff it way down or just exist. And that probably will turn into this fear of criticism, fear of criticizing, fear of conflict, and it's not a great model for a healthy communicative marriage that progresses together. So somewhere in there, there is healthy arguing. So I guess as a general rule of thumb, to answer the question, how often is arguing healthy? It's if you're fighting every day and you don't have the ability to connect, or it's interfering with that connection, and you begin to see this negative impact on other parts of your life, like you're having struggles at work because there's a fight at home, or you don't play anymore, hobbies anymore because you're fighting, that's too much. If you're fighting and figuring out each other's deeply seated need in the fight, and you do what you can to meet each other's needs through cooperative communication, you're probably on the right track. And it might be that there's a little bit of a disagreement daily. It might be a couple of them daily. It might be that there's an argument a week. Rather than worry about the number of arguments, think more about, do we get to an agreement about our needs? Do we get to a clear sharing of what our need is inside of the complaint, our deeply held need inside of the argument? If we can figure out the need that each partner has and begin the process of making agreements around that need, then at least their fighting is going to have purpose and it's going to progress them and they're going to be healthy. And so that's what we're looking for. So we want to fight smarter, not harder. We want to get smart with each other about how we fight. So we don't have to let fights escalate. We're concerned about keeping on one topic at a time. That's how we find the need inside of the topic. And we listen to each other's point of view. Those are healthy arguments, not toxic arguments. Toxic arguments is where you feel unheard, you feel misunderstood, you compete to be correct, or you shove everything in and go quiet because you don't want to compete to be correct, because you don't want to escalate. If arguments play out in a way that you do not feel emotionally safe time and time again, you're not fighting smart. If arguments play out to where you feel emotionally safe at the end and you have like a need met, or you feel like you've sacrificed for a wise need for your partner to have met, all of those are safety promoting. All of those are good. So fighting can be a demand that your partner become just like you. That's the competitive type of fight. No one wants to disappear in the relationship. And so it can't be that we argue to make the other one no longer exist. It can't be that we're in an either or, like either I exist or you exist. And so I'm going to fight big to be understood, but I don't care about understanding you. And so the challenge is to create an argument or fight where both of you feel understood at the end, where both of you feel listened to at the end, where both of you feel seen at the end. And I got to tell you, aside from intimacy, this is the most intimate process. Being understood is a human need. It's an intimate need. It's a need that everyone craves. And so I want you to be very conscious of your partner's need to be seen and really see them in every argument. Really stop thinking that you know everything. Stop thinking that the past equals the future, and let each other grow. Use that atoning sacrifice to grow and become better and become understood at a new level every single day, every single hour, every minute. And so, what are some ways to create solutions that satisfy both? Okay, think about that. What are some ways? First, we might put this up on the board, I'm not sure. But first, we want to realize there's really two types of argument. There's probably a million, but I'll state these two. There's solvable, there's arguments that we can solve, like where do you want to go to dinner? If you start fighting about that and you finally like really listen to each other, and your partner says, look, we've had pizza like so many times. I'm just up to here with pizza. Can we please not do that? And you say, well, but barbecue makes my stomach ache. And so it's always just like, I always get like really bad bloating after barbecue. And so why don't we go get some steaks at the new Longhorn Steakhouse? And shameless plug, they should pay me. Anyway, not the point. Point is they decided on a solvable solution. They go to the steakhouse. They don't get pizza. They don't get barbecue. And they both enjoy their evening. So that was a solvable problem. Most problems, in fact, according to a Gottman study, 67% of our problems, our arguments, are only manageable. So you can solve some problems through a negotiation. Most you manage. And how you manage them is you make agreements and then check in weekly or check in monthly. And so the manageable problems are the ones that we most often can turn toxic with. Like we need to look through a different lens when we think we're solving a problem, but we're literally just managing it, because managing manageable problems that we must manage, will keep recycling, because as we change and grow, it'll show up again. Manageable ones are probably more based upon our experience, our personalities. One of the manageable problems in my relationship, for example, is I'm a little bit of a show-off. I'm a little bit loud, boisterous, and my wife's quiet and doesn't like a lot of attention. And so constantly we're on this path where we're pretty good at negotiating me not embarrassing her, but her letting me have my adrenaline rush of attention. And so there's this play of, okay, is she putting her hand on my leg because I need to quiet down, or is she putting her hand on my leg because she's just feeling like touching my leg? And so we make these agreements like, okay, if I put my hand on your leg, that means you're going too far and you're not letting other people have the floor. And so she helps me calm down and be polite, and I help her have maybe a more fun time than she might have if she was just her quiet self. So we learn to manage that, but it's ongoing. So there's solvable problems and manageable problems. You need to decide which one you're dealing with. And I also want to throw out there that attachment styles do matter. Like here, and we'll have a whole other series on attachment styles and relationships. But if you have a problem avoider and a problem and a person that gets anxious around problems, you'll have a distancer and a pursuer. So if we want to avoid the problem, if this person is a avoidant attachment, they might distance themselves from the person they have a problem with, where the other one pursues. So if your attachment style is that you're anxious and you pursue, and you're with a person that avoids, know that one of the first agreements you need to make is, how do we sit with each other and talk, okay? And so if you look through that lens, really the idea is to make these agreements, and then some of the rules are that you stay on one topic at a time. So think through that lens of, we're going to solve this problem, but we're going to have to look at it one topic at a time. We're going to explore that topic until we both feel understood. Another rule of good arguing is take responsibility for your own actions. So this next little batch of ideas are kind of bullet points that you and your spouse can look to for guidance in how to argue fair and smart. So taking responsibility for your own actions is super important. Like, avoid blaming the other person. Like, I know I did this and it caused some hard feelings I'm sensing. Like, I think this is how it should be. What do you think? Instead of, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. Like, I don't care what you say. See, so take responsibility for your own actions and really like be aware that it's okay. It's okay if you did it wrong. It's okay if you did it right. Just talk through it. Use I statements. This is huge. Use I statements when arguing instead of you statements. Like, I need more help around dinner time versus you never help. How many times have you heard someone say, you always put me last, instead of, I need to be put first? I need you to understand me versus you never even try to understand. You can feel the difference in the tone. They're saying the same thing, but one is a judgmental, harsh statement. Even if you think it's a fact, yeah, you have to own your facts. You have to own your opinions instead of making your partner own it. Like, I never feel listened to is honest. You never listen. They can argue that, and you don't have any room to stand, even if you think you're right. So you either are going to be a bully and push your agenda and think you're right on everything and not let your partner participate, or you're not going to be a bully and listen, okay? So practice active listening. Really clear your bias out of the way. Everyone has biases in how things look. If you can clear your bias out of the way and really listen, you'll make it a lot farther. Avoid interrupting to persuade the other person that you're right. When you hear them start telling their version of what's going on and you cut in and say, nope, that's not how it is. This is how it is. And then you try to talk them, you're just going to compete. How about listen to them all the way through? Some people fix things as they talk. Some people think all the way through it and then say it once. If you're with a person that thinks through it as they talk, by the time they're done, they'll fix most of the things that are maybe incorrect. Or maybe they just see the world different. I had two people look at the word disappointment so different that when he said that he was disappointed, she felt that meant, you're out of here, you're divorcing me. When she said the word disappointment, that's what she would have meant. When he said disappointment, he meant mildly frustrated, not I'm leaving. And so they had a very different definition of that word. So remember, avoid interrupting and persuading. Really listen and ask for a clear definition of what you're hearing that you don't understand. So pause when emotions are running high. If you think about pausing when you get flooded, one research stated that if your heart rate is up above 98, 100 beats a minute, you're too flooded to really listen. So take a 2-minute timeout, a 10-minute timeout, a 20-minute timeout, but make an agreement to come back and finish, okay? So with those points, there's a blueprint for a healthy argument. First, determine what you're arguing about. Choose a topic, name it. Second, who's going to speak first and who's going to listen. So you have a topic and you have a speaker and a listener. So husband speaks, wife listens first. The speaker shares the point of view fully. If it's a huge topic, if it's a lot, break it up into chunks and make sure you're understood. So the speaker shares until understood by the listener. And the speaker will confirm being understood, because I know when I feel understood. Don't cut that in half. Don't take it halfway. Really learn to understand your person, understand your spouse. So the listener, throughout the speaker's turn, validates, empathizes, and uses those skills of reframing and hearing them and defining all the way through. If you empathize and validate and listen, you will never compete. You'll resolve arguments. So many of you refuse to empathize if you think the other one's wrong. You can empathize without agreeing. Empathy means I see that you believe that. Don't be condescending with it, but truly empathize. Listener validates and empathizes all the way through, and then once the speaker feels understood, they switch places. The listener becomes the speaker, and they do the whole thing again. Then you look at the problem. It's on the coffee table in front of you, and you decide, what do we agree on? Put that aside. We agree on all these points. Here's the 3 points we disagree about. Now we make agreements. The agreements can have one of 3 outcomes, really. We agree to do something completely different that we're both happy with. All of our needs get met. We agree that you get your way this time because it makes sense. Or we agree that I get my way this time because that makes sense. Sometimes you just take one for the team and you don't keep score. You trust each other. In fact, I've had couples that are successful. They start arguing that the other one should take one that I should take one for the team, not you. And they start a new argument about that. But that's a cute argument, not a horrible one. So this is about fighting. arguing, how much is too much? If it's toxic and you don't feel understood and it's unsafe, not good arguing. It can be as much as you need as long as you get to an agreement that you're both getting needs met. That's the rule. I hope you had a enjoyable time. I hope this was good. We've got some really clear lessons in here that I'm going to turn into a course that can be purchased here in the near future. Okay, so we'll talk to you again.